Good evening. Welcome to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada in the studios of the Guns and Glory Network. This show is about guns-related politics. A lot of that will follow in these shows, and self-defense issues. Fired Up with Bob Irwin can be seen on YouTube with a new show every Thursday. We generally put it up about 5 in the evening. You can subscribe if you go on YouTube and find the show. There's a subscribe button, and it will automatically appear on your email. It's email, I guess, in a day or two of the broadcast. The audio feed is also rebroadcast for listeners on Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. It's 7 radio stations throughout Nevada, except in Clark County at the moment, but we're negotiating that. You can check them out at www.KELY1230. That's their call sign, KELY1230.com for the station that's in your area. It's all over Nevada, as I said. If you have questions or comments about the show, you can send me an email at bob@firedupmail.com or leave a message on my office home recorder, which is 702-257-1060. I check that at least once every 24 hours. If you have a question or comment, we'd be happy to return your call if you leave contact information. We do answer every text and every recorded message if you contact us and leave your contact information. Email directed to our guests can be done through that, and I will forward it to the appropriate person who was on the show that you're asking about. So there we go. There are several hundred uses of defensive firearms every week in the United States. Between 200 and 300, depending on who's doing the counting. They rarely appear on the mainstream media. So we always start out with a few shooting incidents, self-defense incidents for our listeners' education. That's the point of the show, is that you can put yourself in the person's position that was there, and we will explain what he did right, what he did wrong. Most are good shootings, some are questionable shootings. Once in a while we'll put on one that's just downright stupid, but they're all there for the same reason, so you can look at what happened. And generally here we're talking about solutions that work under law in Nevada, because this is a nationwide show, worldwide actually, where we use Nevada cases to say this is what happened and this would be the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It may not apply in the area where you live. So if you're involved in an actual incident, you shot somebody, you're being sued over a gun incident, you need to contact local counsel. If you can't find one that does gun work, I'd be happy to direct you to one if you hit my email, and I will find someone in your area that is qualified. Today's guest is my good friend and firearms instructor and terrorism expert, Lenny Davis. Lenny, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Bob.
It's
good to be here.
Nice to have you on. Could you give the listeners a little bit of your background?
Sure. As Bob said, my name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent from the Department of Homeland Security. I've been a firearms instructor since 1980 for law enforcement. I've spent the better part of the last 10 years as a subject matter expert in anti-terrorism for the U.S. State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. And I am currently the Director of Training and Investigations for Techstratics International, a local based in Las Vegas security and private investigations firm.
And you train security for?
Train security, law enforcement, civilians.
Basically an anti-terrorism.
Oh, and everything in anti-terrorism. Most of the time in anti-terrorism that we were training any of the friendly governments, their law enforcement, and anti-terrorist teams.
I met a guy at a recent gun show I attended who teaches anti-terrorism, and he's actually been in Dubai during his military career.
Wow.
I was incredibly impressed. There's a lot of folks out there teaching things that, in my humble opinion, they probably aren't really qualified to teach. But go to any gun show and you'll find lots of people who can teach you everything about guns and self-defense. This first story comes to us from KTUU. It's an NBC affiliate, TV2 in Anchorage, Alaska. This took place, the incident took place, the story was released on the 3rd of November this year. One man is in custody following an attempted burglary gone wrong, wherein the citizens at the home actually made a citizen's arrest, detained the guy until police arrived, which is nice. The suspect, he's a 22-year-old, was trying to break into a residential home in the 1300 block of Nunaka Drive. Lenny works as my translator. According to MJ Thim. He's a spokesman with the Anchorage Police Department. The spokesman said that the suspect was attempting to either pick the lock or otherwise break through the back door when the homeowner was alerted to what's going on. When the residents heard the noise, they were able to capture him. They restrained him, taping his limbs together with Gorilla duct tape so he couldn't move, which is nice. That was in the story. There's a plug for Gorilla duct tape in there. When police arrived, they found the suspect on the ground, held at gunpoint by the homeowners. After conducting an investigation at the scene, the Anchorage PD determined the story was legitimate and arrested the 22-year-old for first-degree burglary. No injuries were reported to any of the homeowners. It was not known if the suspect sustained injuries. Apparently, if he did, not much. The officers said that there was no damage done to the home while the would-be intruder was caught in the act of trying to break in, which is obvious. As to whether or not the Anchorage PD recommends private citizens taking matter into their own hands was the point of me doing this story. With similar citizens arrest type actions, Thim said safety is more important. While we really this is an exact quote, while we really appreciate the public's assistance in helping us solve crimes, we don't want the public to put themselves in danger. That's what the police are trained to do. Thim said the circumstances are always varied, and while this intruder was not armed, he easily could have been. You don't know if the suspect's armed, if there's a lot of questions surrounding that. So the best choice of action is to call 911 immediately, Officer Thim said. So his advice, the official Anchorage PD advice, is to call 911 and wait. If you have an intruder, it is extremely rare for police to arrive in time to do anything but mop up the blood if it's still wet, in my opinion. It's easy for me to understand why the police advise this sort of crap, which is what I wrote in my outline, is of course lawsuits from injured suspects. Telling you to defend your family with serious force could be held as encouraging residents to harm criminals. Could be carried on to, well, they sort of deputize these people, asking them to act as officers, et cetera, which is all nice. I understand why the police would say something that foolish. If you need to defend yourself, you need to defend yourself. The police will get there at some point. But I have to disagree with his advice. I understand why.
Well, how many times on this show that we've talked about it, and I've said, you know, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And you are your own first responder. And in these days of mass shootings in public places that you would never, a church, that type of thing, you are your own first responder. You're your best first responder. So you've got to. If somebody's in my house, they are going to get arrested. They are going to get arrested if they're not injured.
By you?
By me.
Yeah, I mean,
if I'm at all capable, they are going to get arrested.
Like I said, I understand their advice. They don't want to open the police to lawsuits by saying they advocated you should shoot at people that are breaking into your house or have broken into your house. There's another case later on, we're going to do the same thing. But obviously, The response time here in Nevada runs, depending where, or in southern Nevada, it runs 7 to 8 minutes, depending on where you are. If you're in a high crime area where there are more patrols, more likely you'll get somebody there quicker. But waiting for the police while someone is trying to kill you, members of your family is, or could kill members of your family.
And when we talk about, I've been teaching a lot lately and getting ready to teach a lot more active shooters. You talk about 7 minutes. The average, and it's very conservative estimate, is about every 15 seconds, as the response time for a police officer in an active shooting situation, someone could be killed every 15 seconds. It's probably much more than that. So you think about that in 8 minutes, that's a lot of chances of people killing you.
It's a lifetime. We'll be back after these messages from one of our sponsors. I appreciate if you would patronize them because they help keep the show on the air. We'll be right back. Hi, I just wanted to let listeners know about a great experience I recently had at Godin Ford. I just bought a new Ford Escape there and they took terrific care of me. Sales manager Moses Martinez and salesman Joe Tim offered me a great deal for Fired Up fans. Call Godin Ford, they're at 702-731-2121, and ask for Joe Tim or Moses Martinez. Ask for the Fired Up discount. They will give you employee pricing. That is invoice plus $100 on any new or used vehicle on the lot. Remember, to receive the Fired Up discount, their employee pricing, you must ask for Joe Tim or Moses Martinez at Godin Ford. They're at 6625 Roy Horn Way here in Las Vegas. Tell them Bob from Fired Up sent you. Thanks. And we are back. This story is from North St. Louis, Missouri from TV4, KMOV, on 11/4 of 2017. Police say this incident happened at a BP gas station at the intersection of Madison and Florissant. If around 6:45 in one evening, if you know where that is, if you happen to live in the North St. Louis area. Probably you don't. Authorities say the victim and 2 robbery suspects were wounded when they exchanged fire during a robbery in Old North St. Louis. The victim went up to a gas station window to buy something. He had a gun in his waistband, the police said. He has a concealed carry permit, but we lost a little bit apparently on the concealed part. It was visible because a suspect walked up behind him while he was at the window and tried to grab his gun, literally grabbed the gun and tried and steal it. The intended victim pulled out another gun before the suspect fired shots. The victim then returned fire, wounding the suspect. Police say the second suspect got out of the car, but he was also hit by the intended victim's gunfire. One suspect was shot in the leg, the other suspect was shot in the stomach. The suspects apparently then got back into their car and drove to a hospital. Authorities say they were conscious and breathing when they arrived. The intended victim was also shot in the shoulder during the attempted robbery. He went up the street to his house. He had walked to the gas station to buy some cigarettes or something at their window where you can walk up to the window. The gas station clerk behind the presumed bulletproof window was not hurt. There's a lot of things here. The concealed firearm, which wasn't actually well concealed apparently, becomes the purpose of the theft or the robbery. When you go to rob a convenience store, this is for you criminal types watching the show, you'd never know, what kind of trips they have in the drawer, or how much cash goes in the slot you can't get into. You may only have $12 and change in the drawer, but the gun, even a cheap gun, is worth a couple $100 on the street, a hot gun. So this robber, immediately seeing the gun, decided that was a better thing to get, so he goes for the gun. That Here we have the surprise of a concealed weapon holder actually is carrying a backup gun. Turns out to be a wise choice, especially if you really don't conceal your first one. And the thugs, of course, they got into their car and drove away. The police called, just another heads up to street thugs. When you come into a medical facility with a gunshot wound, no matter how good your story is about, I shot myself loading I accidentally shot myself in the leg, whatever, no matter what you say, they're going to call the police. They do that. So you need to do like the really good criminals do, go to a veterinarian or something, or treat yourself at home. This guy, amazing. It didn't say anything in the story about the guy behind the bulletproof glass calling the police either. One would presume he did when the shots were exchanged.
You would hope so.
Charge.
This reminds me, a few years ago, I was standing in a Starbucks to get a cup of coffee, and I'm behind two guys in line, and one of them has a Wilson Combat, beautiful 1911 45, probably a $4,000 custom-built 45. The guy in front of him has a Glock, and they both have them in the Kydex no retention holsters, and they're open carrying, which is your right to do that. I'm not saying, and I know I'm going to get a whole bunch of people, oh, well, it's our right. Yeah, it is your right. But I look at it from a tactical thing. I spent most of my life, adult life, in the tactical aspects of things. If you're going to open carry, which is your right, you're giving away one thing, and you're giving away surprise, okay? Absolute, you're giving away that ability to surprise somebody with a concealed weapon. And I talked to these two guys because I literally was probably a foot and a half away. All I would have had to done was reach forward and got this guy's, beautiful 1911. And they got their coffee. I didn't say anything to them until they sat down, and I kind of went over and I said, hey, look, guys, I'm a firearms instructor and I'm an ex-federal agent, and this is kind of what, and the one guy told me, he says, well, I have a CCW, but I like to be able to tell the bad guys that I am not to be messed with. That wasn't the term he used. And I said, well, here's the problem with that. You are making yourself a huge target, and that's what they're doing. So I'm not a big proponent of open carry. I mean, if that's all you can do, or if that's what you really want to do, more power to you. But I just think you're giving such a tactical advantage away to a potential shooting.
I have to agree, and I've had some discussions with some of the open carry guys over that issue, particularly not these guys who are wearing them around town as they go through their normal day's practice, but some of that group, or people of like thinking, tend to do that. They go up to the welcome sign on the Las Vegas Strip. They go, walk up and down the Strip in front of casinos and so forth. And that causes police response. When police dispatch gets a call, there's a guy with a gun standing by the side entrance or walking by the side entrance to the MGM or whatever, they're going to send a unit. They have to. And when that officer approaches and he says, why are you out here with a gun? And the guy responds, I have a right to carry a gun, and you can't harass me, and so on and so on. That doesn't help our tourism industry. Frightening the tourists does not gain us anything, and I would encourage open carriers to stay out of those areas where you're simply showing off to see how many tourists will take notice of you, because most of them come from areas where you can't carry guns openly, and only the bad guys are carrying guns.
And a lot of the countries that you can't possess firearms as a civilian, so
and they react poorly. And, I don't know whatever political points you're making when you do that, but you shouldn't do that. That's just, I've argued with them and so forth, and I understand your right to keep and bear arms and all that stuff, and I agree with your right to keep and bear arms. And I agree with carrying openly when you're out in the boonies and all that, and when you're hunting and things and so forth, but it never made any sense to me to do that because of our tourist industry here and the people that you're interacting with when you hang around the Strip. That's all.
And when you look at recent events on the Strip with firearms, the tragedy on
especially now.
Especially now, what are you doing if you go down there and go, well, it's my right to carry my AR-15 around? It is your right, but you know what? You're going to cause such a panic, and I've tried to tell guys, you cause that panic, and what's going to happen? Some tourist is going to go, oh my God, they've got a gun, they've got an assault rifle or whatever, a machine gun, and they are going to run out, and they're going to run away from you. And what if they run out into traffic in Las Vegas Boulevard and get hit? Guess what? You're liable for that.
And what if they go,
yeah, or have a heart
fall
attack.
over? It's just, we're in a tourism industry, tourism city. We depend on tourists. Try not to do that, guys, if you can. I understand the rights and all that stuff. It's just, most questions, there's two sides, and this is one of them. You also don't want to let the bad guy know you're carrying. It's better if you surprise him than he knows you're carrying. So that's a whole issue for a whole other show. We're going to break again for another one of our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a few moments. Don't go away. One of our sponsors, Grant Defense, manufactures AR-15 rifles right here in Las Vegas. While you can still obtain a personal military-style sporting rifle, check these out before you buy. That's Grant Defense. They're at 5580 South Decatur. And before you buy a personal carry handgun, check out his custom Glocks. Keel Grant makes and modifies these into incredible carry guns. They're located right next to the Dewey Animal Shelter. While you're there, pick up a rescue dog for your home while you are nearby. Thank you. Hey, good afternoon again, good evening again. This is Bob Irwin back from the commercials. Still with my friend here, Lenny Davis, who hasn't walked off the show yet, which is good. This is kind of a political thing, this last story. The Washington Examiner came out with an article on the 5th of November, results from a poll on home defense issues. This was done by Pew Research, basically, and a few other, what they called other sources. The first thing it came up with is 8 in 10 gun owners are ready to kill if they're threatened. I would fall into that majority. With gun ownership on the rise, they said the numbers of those concealed carry permits and the number of concealed weapon permits exploding, which it is. The new poll shows Americans are ready to use those weapons when they're threatened. In a survey for insurancequotes.com, 78% say they're mentally and physically prepared to kill an intruder. Even if those were armed with less lethal weapons, such as pepper spray or golf club, they would kill if they had to. Some 44% of homes have a gun, according to Pew Research. I will get off their outline for just a second and comment one thing here. There is no real number as to how many homes have a firearm in the United States, obviously. If someone calls you and says, I'm from Pew Research, do you have a gun in your house? Click. Are you going to lie? God.
Crank call.
Click, none of your business, whatever. I got one of those calls once, said the same thing, and I said, no, why would I have a gun in my house, and hung up. I may have more than one. If you are dumb enough to answer that question, you're in this survey that says 44% of homes have guns. The thrust of the survey was to see how well prepared Americans are to handle an intruder if it appears they are generally up to the task. And it does appear. About 45% of the people in the survey believe they will face an intruder at some point in their lives. That is a really scary, it's probably true, but that's a really scary number that the public is aware of that. Those who have felt most threatened have armed themselves with security cameras. The next choice was a gun, followed by pepper spray, an alarm system, a baseball bat, or a golf club. All felt they could be better prepared, said the survey. Overall, 70% of Americans felt they would be better prepared for they should be better prepared for an intrusion situation. Women felt the least prepared for an invasion situation, despite expecting it more than the other demographic. Democrats and non-parents thought an intruder was less likely to enter their home, but felt they should be prepared more so than their relative counterparts. Half of Americans believe they will need to defend themselves or their family from a violent intruder at some point, 45%. That is a really scary number. Unfortunately, it's probably really true also.
I would hazard a guess that that's probably at least right on the money, if not maybe a little bit conservative.
It only makes sense to prepare. Next time I have you on, we're going to do a show about that, actually, about a prep guy. Make your home less attractive, good locks, bright lights, alarms, and cameras. In the bad guys, burglars and whatnot, that in my career I've been able to talk to, which have, as a lot of listeners know, I spent a lot of time in law enforcement. I've been able to interview a lot of criminals during that time frame. And the number one thing they don't like is cameras. They see a house with cameras, they back off and go to the next one because they're afraid of being identified.
And the next thing they don't like is when they hear a very large barking sound from the back. They go, do not want to go in that house.
Yeah, that's, cameras, good locks, not cheapy locks, change your locks to more, better deadbolts, things like that. Bright lights, brighter than your next door neighbor, alarms. But cameras were the number one thing that the bad guys cited.
Well, and you see so much now that's very easy for the homeowner, to install, and I mean, where they're interactive with your cell phone,
right.
And boom, you're there, and hey, I've got a picture, and you can talk to these guys. I'm very impressed with some of the technology, and it's not that expensive, folks. It's pretty cheap.
That is good. If you're buying your fourth gun for home defense, instead of buying the fifth gun, buy a camera set or one of these intrusion devices. All you need to do in the short version is at 11 o'clock at night, walk out to the sidewalk, look at your house, look at the house on either side of you, and make yours harder to break into than the one on either side. Burglars tend to work neighborhoods because they like the escape routes or whatever, but once they're in the area that they're working, they pick easy targets. So you have brighter lights, A dog is great. I agree with that. I've told people, buy a gigantic dog dish at the pet food place and set it on your back porch. When they get in the backyard, they'll assume the dog's in the house because he's not in the yard, and they'll go someplace else.
Here in the Southwest, one of the great things that we've been able to do, because it's the desert, is there's this cactus, and it's nasty. It will bite you. It's called a cholla cactus, and you can very easily do that in your desert landscaping and plant them under your windows, because they will grow, and you're not going to get not going to get anywhere close to your windows. So, you have to be careful where you put them. If you got small kids, you don't want them bumping into it. But, I have a couple of cholla around my house for specifically that reason.
I have one more story I was just going to briefly mention. We've got a minute or a minute and a half left of this show. On the 6th of November, again, we received notice that longtime self-defense and gun publisher Paladin Press was closing after nearly 50 years. They were having an online sale. They sold most of their stuff off now to wholesalers and are gone. They were a great source, Paladin, for learning about firearms and gun safety and all related subjects. It's sorry to see them leave. The internet killed them as it killed most print media. You can buy all these books online for You know, you can get most of it for free now, sponsored by a number of websites that teach legitimate self-defense thing, Concealed Carry Association being the one that's on the top of my list currently. But they're gone, and it's not that people don't like guns or buy guns, it's that they're getting killed by, print media is getting killed in every aspect of it. We are running out of time. I want to thank you again for tuning in to Fired Up. We'll be back next week, put a new show out every Thursday around 5 o'clock, and we'll be delighted to help educate you on the issues that we have. Thank you, Lenny.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming in again. I
Anytime.
appreciate it, and we'll see you all next week.